Welcome to Leaders in Light, Love, and Legacy. We're airing every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern on Zen Radio /Fave Unite Radio. I'm Joy Ruffen, your leadership and signature style specialist, your minister of, love this, enlightenment, awareness, and awakenings. Oh, my eagles, we are in a time of awakenings. We're here diving into honest conversations about power, presence, and purpose every Tuesday. I'll be sitting down with a featured guest speaker. Whoa, you're in for a treat today every time we sit together. This featured guest speaker is going to bring fresh insights on the divine masculine and feminine and power and all the other things that are involved. And it all will entail what you're about, because we carry the divine masculine and feminine regardless to the gender. It's about alignment. It's about leadership. It's about building a legacy that's true to who you are. So whether you're listening in now for inspiration, direction, or just a new perspective, it's all meant to stir, ignite something in you. Remember, there's always more waiting for you at joyruffen.com. Now, my League of Eagles, let's get comfortable and help me before I bring him up. Let me share a little bit about my featured guest speaker. Now, we laugh and choke and chuckle together because I have such a hard time with his name, but he's given me grace. It's Richard, and I think he pronounces it something very close to this. I'm going to ask him to pronounce it when he comes up here, Mahlangu, but he's going to give you a different pronunciation. Richman is the youngest of 5, born and raised more or less in South Africa. He's going to give you the city, the state, the town, and all of that. And at just 12, he picked up a tennis racket. And that somewhat, he'll tell you, changed his life forever. There's so much more I could tell you about him. The journey from South Africa to Austria and eventually to the US is nothing short of extraordinary. But why don't you just sit back and help me welcome our featured guest speaker, Richman. Share your last name with us before we get going. Let's have a laugh together.
In America, it's pronounced Mahlangu, but in South Africa, it's pronounced Mahlangu, but it's all good.
It's all good. Thank you for your grace. I am grateful for it. I do have a hard time with names, but Richman is easy. Richman, give us a little bit of your background, how you started out, the town, the city that you were born in, and how apartheid was such a big part of your upbringing, so to speak.
Thank you so much for such a nice introduction. It's an honor, it's a privilege to have this opportunity to share my story. It's very humbling. I was born in Durban, South Africa, in a city called Durban, but the township that I grew up in is Lamontville. Mm-hmm. Both of my parents did not have any formal education. In fact, my mom and dad could not read or write. When I was 12 years old, about 13, one morning my father was working in the garden when he suddenly fell down and died, leaving my mother with 5 children. Mm-hmm. I was the youngest of the 5. We were 3 girls, my brother and I. It was a terrible time. During this time, South Africa was still under the rule of law of the apartheid regime, which classified Black people, Indian people, and colored people as second-class citizens, meaning we couldn't vote. There's certain restaurants we could not go to. Even at the beach, they were all separated. Blacks could only go to certain beaches, and same thing as nightclubs. So basically, we were forced to basically spend most of the time in the township. Some of the white areas, people could work, but at a certain time they had to leave.
I am just mesmerized by your story, Richman, because first off, thank you for clarifying the city and the township that you were born in and so on and so forth. But when we get to this apartheid and that you were still considered back in the day second-class citizen, and I think I recall you sharing with me before that there were four categories or classifications of people there in South Africa. Tell us about that. The 4 classifications were what again? That was white, black.
We had whites who were in power. We had blacks, we had Indians, and we had coloreds. And these are Indians from India that came to South Africa during. This was actually during apartheid. Basically, came for work. Also with the communities. And then we have coloreds, which, as far as I was made to understand, coloreds were Malaysian slaves that came with Europeans to South Africa, but at some stage they formed a community of their own, and they considered coloreds. So in the ranking of how the apartheid government was ranked people, we had whites at the top, we had Indians, we had coloreds, and then blacks were at the bottom of the group, which also basically money was spent by the government. Areas we lived was all based on white privilege, and then the Indians, the coloreds, and then the blacks.
The second class citizens, was that blacks only, or did that apply to colored as well and Indians? Were the blacks only the ones? I have an inkling, but I want you to share it with the audience and those who will tune in. Who were considered this, other than black, second-class citizens?
Well, only whites were basically considered humans, which would basically vote. So Indian, black, and coloreds, we could not vote. We were all second-class citizens.
That's what I thought.
We didn't have a say, basically, or what was happening in South Africa at the time in terms of how the government was.
Richmond, when did, I think I have an inkling, but I don't assume anything at this age and stage is beautiful time in my life. When did that all change? We all know somewhat, but when did it change and the citizenship and to be able to vote and all that other stuff came about? When was that?
I think Mr. Mandela was released out of prison in 1994.
Yes.
This is when everything then changed and then eventually became the president of South Africa. And then there was slowly the dismantling of the apartheid regime. But we're very fortunate that Mr. Mandela had a lot of wisdom and empathy, and he recognized the importance of building a South Africa for all people, which he did not advocate whites getting kicked out of South Africa or being attacked. He avoided the civil war by asking a lot of white people who were in the government to stay and work to build a South Africa for everybody. So I'm so grateful that we had a man that had wisdom to be able to, after 27 years of incarceration, he may have been angry, but he wasn't bitter. So he came out and basically modeled for all of us that, we can do better, even though other people may not treat us with respect and that we're looking for, but we can turn around and show them a better example.
Richmond, the analogy that you used is brilliant, and I hope that many who are tuning in here will take this to heart and soul connected. He was angry but not bitter, because it's easy to understand that no matter what your level of awareness might be. And I equate Nelson Mandela somewhat, I know there are vast differences, with Gandhi in India, because he did somewhat the same thing, and he did it with heart and soul connected. So the analogy for me is broad-based. I don't know how you see that. Do you see any similarities there at all? Because that angry and not bitter, is very, very powerful.
Definitely, there is a huge, lots of similarities. In fact, Gandhi came to South Africa. And when he came to South Africa, since we had I believe South Africa is, even today, has got the biggest population of Indians in the world. It's outside of India. And he came to South Africa primarily, a lot of Indians were also having their own disputes among themselves, but were also being subjected to really heavy sanctions about apartheid. So he came to represent, because he had studied law in England, became a lawyer. Yes. So he basically took a boat to South Africa, and he came to represent a lot of Indians and also help them solve their own disputes at no charge. Didn't charge them. He also advocated for people to work together. He was not, again, the same idea we're talking about of anger. He never lifted a finger, even back in India, where ultimately, the British did end up living without any kind of of war that he was advocating. So there's a lot of similarities between the two men.
I find it, Richmond, fascinating because Gandhi in India, the class separation, from those who were uppity, so to speak, and the upper royalty, and then those who were at the lower bottom, and Nelson Mandela with the apartheid in Africa. To me, the analogy is amazing. So thank you for sharing that. Now, how did you go from this upbringing, this background, and sharing the story about your father and how he passed away? Share a little bit about us, what your relatives at a time thought maybe was the cause, and then later what you felt it might have been, and it was never really decisive on what happened. But share with us a little bit about that, and then how that took you, or you went from there to tennis. That's what we want to hear.
Yeah. So basically, this was very common in the Black community in South Africa, that the men worked in a city while the wives with children were in a rural area in a farm.
Right.
So in my situation at the beginning, my father lived in a hostel in Durban, and we had a house in Northern Natal in a village called Springbok in Danhausa. And we had cows and sheep, so I grew up milking cows and all that stuff. I had to walk to school 45 minutes each way because there were no buses. But anyway, so the school that we were attending, called Black Bank Middle School, it ended up at middle school, and then there was no high school. So and then these kids would move with my father. He had actually found a house in the township of Lamontville. So all my siblings had gone, and it was just me and my mother. On the 22nd of December 1977, I believe, as a surprise, my mother puts me in a train to go and join them in the township to celebrate Christmas. And at the same day, my father gets into the train in Durban, boards the train to come to Danhausa to visit us as a surprise. And of course, we meet each other along the way. Mind you, there were no phones at this time.
Yes.
We didn't have a phone. So there was no communication of any kind. I get to the city, and my sibling says, well, Baba is not here. Baba went to Danhausa to visit you guys, so it's kind of a surprise. But interesting enough, the couple of days leading to Christmas, most of the time people are excited and happy. They're cooking in the African culture.
Yes.
Everyone is happy in some way. We don't do a lot of expensive presents and stuff. Mostly presents are for little kids, the younger ones, stuff for school. And my family, my siblings and I, we kind of very dull. We didn't know why. And my father gets into to my mom in Danhausa. He's there for the first day, second day, and then this whole thing when he working in the garden. He says this is actually in hindsight. My mother says the night before they were trying to sleep and they had steps on the roof of the house, and my dad would go outside and look, and there was nothing there. They'll come back into the house. And they had the curtains shut, it was at night, and they'll see a flame of fire. And my dad opens the door and go outside, and there's nothing there. So, and then the next morning, they wake up. That is when he was working in the garden, when he suddenly fell down and then died.
Wow.
So this is actually, obviously, we don't know this whole thing is happening. Eventually, 2-3 days later, I believe the 24th, we get the news. 24th of December 1977. And then obviously there's crying in the morning. But to jump ahead on a story, coming back, so I start school and then in the township, and coming back from school, I get home, people are crying and, still mourning the father of my dad, really sadness. So I decided to get out of the house so I didn't have to kind of deal with the whole trauma. Down the street, there was an old tennis court where I learned there were guys there playing tennis. It was an old ragged tennis court with holes in them and everything. And so I kind of became a ball boy by default because the guys were not very good. So they very often hit the ball over the fence, and I had to run and grab the ball and throw it back at them. And then one day, one of them invited me. A couple of days later, two guys came that were actually good players. They were dressed in full white. I mean, the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. White socks.
And you were what age? What age were you at that time?
I was 13 then. I was 13. So they playing back and forth. Eventually, the next day, a friend of mine and I are playing just back and forth barefoot. These guys come again. So they were just being polite, being nice. They didn't want to kick us off. Their names were Benson Lovo, who's still a friend today, and Tobias Mavunda. Tobias was actually just from down the street from my house, but I didn't know him. And then, so they play for about a few minutes with us, and then they eventually say, okay, we volunteer to sit down because we knew they wanted to play, with each other, which they could actually play a set or whatever. Eventually, this guy, Benson, takes an interest and invites me. He takes me to this place called Ewema, which was about half an hour from my house. There were 3 tennis courts there and a wall where you could play on your own if you didn't have a partner. And there were a lot of people there, but were black because we had 2 tennis associations at the time. The whites play on their own association, and then the other ones were black Indians and colored in this association. So in this community of these tennis players, they were all black men. Most of them were actually educated. It's the first time in my life I met educated black men that had degrees. They drove their own cars. They had families, 1 wife and children. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a lawyer, that black people could be lawyers. So they've gone to some of these special schools that the government had created for black lawyers or whatever. Anyway, there was an unwritten code that when the black young kids came to play tennis, everybody was responsible to take them under their wing and mentor them. So when they found out that I did not have a father, they all basically were all over me in terms of if I played with some of them in the afternoon, they'll drive me home and drop me off before they went to their own homes, which was in the different townships. None of them lived in Lamontville other than Benson. So obviously, and they spoke English to me a lot of times as a manner of trying to help me improve my English.
This is what we call here in the States, and it's so beautiful to hear it coming from you about your upbringing. This is what we call a blended extended family. They took you under their wings and embraced you. And I have to share with you that when my mom and dad separated, there were 9 brothers on my father's side. They all became extended fathers for my sister and I. So I really received this. I get this. This is this is just beautiful to share that you're sharing this. And they all took you under their wing, so to speak.
These people became my father. It's actually interesting how you explain that your father's brothers. Yes. You didn't say your uncle, except because that's exactly how it's like in Zulu, in my culture. All my father's brothers are not uncles. So we identify if they're older than my dad or younger than my dad. So if they're older than my dad, will be older dad, and younger dad if they're younger than my father. That is how the Zulu culture is. The only time we get an uncle, it's from my mother's brothers, and then they're my uncle. The same thing as my mother's sisters, they're not my aunts. They are my younger mom and older mom. That's how close in terms of relation the Zulu culture, African culture is.
Well, Richman, this is a revelation. I don't think many people, regardless of their background and culture and their ethnic, are aware of what you just said. Because I myself was not even aware of the distinct difference in how you announce or present something to another person in regards to your background and culture. So this is revelationary for me. It's fascinating. Yeah. But when these people took you under their wing, so to speak, did they embrace you other than the love of tennis, and give you the initiative to want to explore more of their lifestyle and become more of what you were visually aware of and around at that time?
No, they never really. This is the thing with the African culture. These people, the older African in our culture, the adults just model. They didn't actually have to say anything to me. And one of the things that happened, obviously, I was pretty well behaved without sounding like an idiot. I was pretty well behaved because back home, every adult is responsible to straighten out a younger person. When I say straighten out, I'm not talking about physical violence. I'm talking about if you do something inappropriate, any adult has a right to tell you this is inappropriate, you shouldn't be doing this. Yes. So, I mean, I never had any of them ever curse or do anything. So that just became my role models. So they drove me home. They bought me something to eat during the day, and then of course they drive me home at night, which was make me feel very, very safe. So most of them would come back after 5 o'clock after they got off work. So most of the time I'll get out of school and go and start hitting the ball against the wall. So one afternoon, as I was waiting, this white man shows up behind me, and he is wearing this tennis outfit. He's got a basket of tennis balls and a tennis racket. He watches me play, and then he comes and greets me, and then he goes and teaches a lesson. This lesson he was teaching a young lady who had gotten some kind of scholarship to come to America from my township. Her father had searched in Yellow Pages for a coach to give her a lesson in case in America when she came here she could play and have meet people. He goes and gives her a lesson, and he comes back to me, and then he says, you got a good technique. How long have you been playing? I'm like, well, a couple of months. Of course, I was terrified. I'd never spoken to a white man before. Other than the only white people that I'd met, I wouldn't say that I'd known, that I'd seen, I should say, were basically mostly the police in the township who came with their guns and canine dogs, or during the riots of apartheid, where we had the military basically coming with machine guns. So those are the only white people that I'd seen. And in the time I didn't even hear the accent because I didn't know how white people spoke. So he was actually British. So he says to me, he tells me a couple of things about, take your racket back early and try to watch the ball, keep your head down when you hit the ball, blah, blah, blah. And then before the conversation is over, Benson, this other guy, this friend of mine, shows up, and we end up talking to him together. Benson spoke better English. He was older in high school. Eventually, Mr. Gray invites us to a place called Case. The hotel was about an hour and a half away, taking 2 buses from the township. He said he coaches a group of young white children there. We could come in on a Saturday and help him pick up the balls like his ball boys, and then we'll get a half an hour lesson after. Benson ended up dropping out of this, and I carried on. So I would go there. And 2 years later, of course, my game got better. I got improved, and the people in the township started noticing that my tennis had gotten better. Most of these black men I was talking about and the ladies played there, they never had any lessons in their whole life. They just played for fun, socially, unorthodox style. So they could see that, I had some refining, and I had some good technique that I was producing. In fact, they started asking me to help them with some of their strokes. Anyway, Tim Gray, before he leaves Durban to go to Pietermaritzburg to run a health farm, goes to a white club called Mitchell Park, and he asked for a special permission if they could allow me to play tennis there, because at the times, black people did not play in white clubs. So there was a gentleman there by the name of Trevor Hall, who was, I believe he was the secretary of the club. So he says, yeah, bring this kid in. So eventually, I started attending Mitchell Park. Another absolutely terrifying experience, because, during apartheid, or even, not even just apartheid, in any situation where you are inferior, people don't have to say all these nasty things for you to feel inferior. You just kind of know your place based on the culture.
You know what? Thank you for sharing that. And excuse my laughter, because I'm laughing in love and lightness at this time, realizing really that it had to be somewhat frightening and traumatic for you at that time. Because what most of us forget, it's different to read something, to hear something, to be aware, but not to experience it through somebody who's actually lived it. So when you say you'd never seen any white people, you didn't know how they spoke, and these white people showed up, and only when they maybe coming for something. I mean, all of that, you have to really take it in and breathe for a second. And this was what year? 1998, 99, 97? Because apartheid.
No, this was 77, 19.
It was before the apartheid was over.
It was before. This was actually happening during apartheid. Because I started playing tennis, I believe, in 1979.
Okay.
So this is like the 80s, 81.
Yeah. And you know what? All of this that you're sharing, so many of us forget, no matter how much of a voracious reader you might be and movies you've seen and so on. But all of what you're saying is very paramount for all of us to take in and remember, Richman. But what you said, and it's all aligned and connected, is that the elders were models for the young people, and there was no cursing in the language. And then how this particular person, I think you said Tim Graves, took you in and allowed you to get to this club that was white only, that allowed you to come in. So pick that up and tell us what happened there. And from there, I think you went from there to Austria later on, and then to where you are now in Las Vegas. Share with us how that came about.
Do you mind if I share one more quick point before that?
No, please do. No rush.
I do, because you just picked up on something important there about this role model. These men that I met, none of them that I knew smoked or drank, did drugs. So my family, my father obviously, as I mentioned, was a minister. There was no alcohol in the house, nobody smoked, whatever. In the township, however, most of the boys were my age, were all drinking, doing drugs. They were fighting on weekends, stabbing each other. It was terrible, and some of them had made girls, pregnant. And which included my family. As I mentioned, I had three sisters, and one of them had twins. So in a tiny little house we lived in after the death of my father, there were 10 people because we had these 4 babies. So doing homework was a nightmare because we had to wait for the baby to go to sleep. But the role models of these men basically lasted with me because I had these people I looked up to. There are specific things that they did, specific things that they did not do. Even today, I'm 61 years old. I've never tried alcohol, nor smoking, or any of that stuff. So that was actually, to me, very, very, I was very grateful. Okay, Mitchell Park. I'm at this white tennis club now. I am terrified. The first day there, I remember when they asked me to go and play doubles, because Saturdays was only a doubles game only. It was my turn to serve. I double faulted twice in a row. If anybody understands anything about tennis, is when you try to serve and you hit, you can't get any of the two serves that you have into the box. Anyway, but eventually a lot of these people were very, very kind. And some of them, as time went on, started arranging for me to play with their kids. And they all knew that it was mostly for my benefit because it exposed me to better competition. And then some of them started giving me rides back to the bus stop on Saturday evening. And in some of them, in fact, I'm still friends with them today because they came to America to go to college. One afternoon, while I'm at Mitchell Park, I heard about a lot of these about these players. Basically, when they turned 18, instead of going to the military, because it was still mandatory for the whites, they would get scholarships and come to America if they were good. So I started basically putting together this idea that why can't I do that? I want to go to America. I'd heard about America. But I didn't know the difference between Europe. America was just all overseas.
Yes.
I started writing to some universities. In fact, there's a lady that I met at the supermarket by the name of Mrs. Lewis. I didn't know this at the time. Actually, it was a Jewish family that lived in South Africa. Because on Fridays and Saturday morning, I used to work at Pick n Pay like a Smith's here and push the cart into the pack their bags, put in a cart and push to the car. Yes. And then they'd give me 50 cents or whatever. And this lady had taken interest. She'd seen a picture of me winning a tournament. So she started sponsoring me. And then she took me to the American embassy. We started writing to universities in America, applying for scholarships. So the doors of thinking about going to America had been opened in a bigger thing, because I wanted to do that. I thought it was the best way for me to escape the hardships of apartheid, is getting an education. Anyway, Ray Schwegman, this man comes, a South African. He's on vacation in South Africa in 1983, I believe. And he was actually just very lucky because he belonged to Berea Tennis Club, which was 10 minutes down the street. But on this particular day, he came to Mitchell Park. He hears my story, and then he says, well, if you were to finish school, I owned a tennis camp in Austria. I could sponsor you. And if you still want to go to America and get an education afterwards, I'll support you. So eventually he sponsors me. 1985, March 1985, I fly to Austria. And I land in Vienna. It was about, I believe, minus 10 degrees. We drive 4 hours to a place called St. Wolfgang, which is 45 minutes west of Salzburg. At this camp, Mr. Schwegman had about 45 people that came there, every week. We had Austrians, Swiss, and German people. And guess what? The first language for all these people was German. So what does it mean?
Richman, you cannot glance over this. You're going over it like, you lived it. But for those of us who are sitting way on the outside, somewhat mesmerizing, wanting to know more about the story, you said somewhere in the beginning of sharing how you didn't know the difference between overseas and America. You just knew that, you were thinking about going somewhere. And then here comes this person, several, who kind of sponsored you. And then you wind up in Austria. The degree, how was that? How did you acclimate? How long did it take you? Because that's such a major transition in one's life, no matter what stage of life you're in. Share more about that.
It's just interesting because I was, since I was a little kid, I had this incredible curiosity. And I just never was afraid to try things and fail. And to me, this was just something that in my mind was supposed to happen. But when I go to Austria, all of a sudden, I'm around all these white people. None of them, very few of them spoke English, except the coaches at the camp. And all the coaches were South African, were white South African. So we still have a little bit of our apartheid even within our table. Because a lot of, in fact, if not all of them, they grew up having gardeners and cooks in their homes.
We're black.
So all of a sudden I'm sitting at the table with them. There was still some kind of tension. But in terms of Austria, very, very interesting because a lot of these European people, some of them have never seen black people live close other than on television. They wanted to touch my hair. They couldn't stop telling me that they would like my skin. In the summer, they lay outside and get a tan. Now think about this for a minute. A 21-year-old coming from the township who basically is being raised to believe that being black is a sin. Obviously, I never believed that. And then all of a sudden, you get to Europe and white people tell you they lay in the sun so they look as dark as you, in the summer. It can be also very confusing because all of a sudden, I could go to any bathroom I wanted to go to now. I could get into any bus. I could go to any nightclub. And 2 days before that, I couldn't do that in my country. So it was just kind of like coming of age, learning a lot of things. I could go on a date. You do get white women coming to you and say, hey, how are you? Fine. I have never gone out on a date with a black man. What are you doing tomorrow now? Would you like to go to dinner? These are just experiences that happened that actually you realize it gave me an ability to be able to evaluate my own culture, my own country from outside.
Yes. And the saving grace that you said there is that insatiable curiosity that you have. I have it too, so I understand and can relate to what you're sharing. But you said that coming of age and that transition, that's what, Richman, I wanted you to speak to a wee bit, because it had to be, even with that insatiable curiosity, it's like an age of wonder too, that insatiable curiosity, age of becoming, the transition, and then the wanting to touch your hair and feel your skin and all of these different things. That was a major, major transition in your life. And it seems like because of that insatiable curiosity, you acclimated rather quickly. How long did it take you to learn the language?
Well, in South Africa, we grew up with, so I grew up with 4 languages because I learned Zulu is my first language. So I learned English in school and I learned Afrikaans, which is actually a Dutch, which is the dialect of Dutch from Holland. And then I learned German. So in between, Afrikaans helped me to pick up German a little quicker. It takes a long time because it's quite a difficult language. But again, here is my ignorance. I have a former girlfriend who used to say, you're one person that has got absolute just kind of like blind ignorance. You just go and do things. Eventually they work out and you never think twice about doing them. And then, of course, I realized she's really right. So I just went and felt like here's another interesting challenge. If I want to stay here and learn and be successful, I have to learn the language. But I'm gonna jump because I do realize our time is running short.
No, go. But these are the things, though, Richman, as far as the acclimation, the transition, and all the change, which is so terrifying to the majority of people. And change is what all of life is inevitably about, from out of the womb until the grave. It's about being able to make those transitions as gracefully as you can. And we go back to the anger, but no bitterness. And it sounds like you didn't have any of that stuff when you arrived. That wasn't part of your DNA. No, we have some time left, so don't rush. But this
I actually didn't, because, fortunately, this is one of the other experiences that having traveled around the world and meeting people who had hardships with racism and all this kind of stuff, discrimination. I seem to have been very fortunate, because at a very early age, I had white people who were kind, who showed me kindness for no reason whatsoever. So I never really saw white people from that angle. And this is my personal experience. I don't say that people shouldn't. I'm just talking about my own personal experience.
I know.
I never really looked at white people. I mean, I always saw the police in South Africa but I remember also, growing
you didn't
up,
see them as devils, Richman. That's what you're saying. You didn't see white people or other people who were supposedly putting themselves above you as devils, which is what a lot of people who are angry do. Because they don't get
exactly. But also remember, when you're growing up under the apartheid regime in South Africa, you don't really understand and know what it actually means. You know the word apartheid, but you don't have the education to understand what actually has been taken away from you, what opportunities have been taken away from you. For a silly example, in South Africa, in the South African schools during those days, we had what was called Bantu education. Bantu education was an inferior curriculum created specifically for black schools only. Even the colored schools and Indian schools did not have Bantu education except for us. It was a complete lowest level you can find of education. So we basically, the teachers that taught us did not go to regular universities. They went to the schools that the government had built. So their curriculum were also very controlled. So as I said earlier, when I flew overseas geographically, I had no idea where I was. We were taught that Adolf Hitler was a great general that led the German army. I only discovered when I go to Europe about the atrocities that happened with the Jewish community. We didn't learn that growing up in South Africa.
Back up a wee bit, because you said something that a lot of people who are tuning into this from all over the globe will hear and wonder. I heard the Bantu, the lowest level of education for the black people. That's what I heard, right? But I also heard that you were taught, I think that you were taught that Hitler was what? The greatest?
He was a great general for the German army.
Wow.
We didn't learn anything about the persecution of the Jewish community. I didn't learn anything about it. In fact, I first learned about it when I go to Europe. When people asked me, and I had no idea what the heck they were talking about.
And you know what? That's probably because a lot of people know and don't know that the German race, so to speak, was a large part of the African communities, right? I mean, the Germans were heavily influenced in Africa, all throughout Africa, as I understand it with my limited knowing. Is there any truth to that?
They did colonize a good number of countries in Africa, but South Africa was predominantly the Dutch and the English.
Dutch and English. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right. So those three were the main pivotal. Fascinating. Yeah. All right, my love, tell us, because we do have about a good 10 minutes left here. Tell us about the tennis transition and what you did in Austria, and then how you got to Vegas and what you're doing now. Because the work that you're doing now, you are modeling back for the young people that you're working with in the school systems as a counselor, what needs to be to grow, to evolve. So share with us whatever and however you want to end with that.
Another lucky day in Austria, we have a guy visiting at the camp. He's looking for a hitting partner. I get to hit with him. We get done and he says, your game is good enough. I'm not sure why you're teaching tennis full-time at this young age. I tell him I'm having a hard time getting to America. Picks up the phone, calls the coach in Vegas, a guy by the name of Craig Witcher, who was the head pro for the women and men at University of Nevada, Las Vegas at the time. I go to speak to him. At first, I thought this whole thing was a joke. I thought it was a hoax. Somebody put him up to it. So eventually, I get recruited to come to UNLV in 1986. I arrived here. I had absolutely no idea where I was again in the world. I landed in Los Angeles. When I landed in Los Angeles, I saw a picture of President Reagan on the wall. And then I take this long elevator. And my very first experience in this big airport in LAX, I go down the escalator. There's about 5 cops holding a guy at gunpoint in the middle of the airport. And this was a black guy. Yes, and of course, at the time, I didn't know the whole history of policing in America or anything. And they asking him, to lay down and, lay down, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, he lays down, he gets arrested. I go on with my journey. Even though it was on my ticket, I thought I had arrived. I'm sorry, I have to sneeze.
That's okay. Thank you for that. No, this is the beauty of live stuff. It's audio, but still, we do have our whatever to do from time to time. This is fascinating for most people, how you acclimated. And then you're in LA and you're at the airport, and then from there, go on.
So even though it was on my ticket that my destination was Las Vegas, I'm just completely lost, and I think I'm arrived. And they said, no, you still have to take another flight to Vegas. I take a flight, get to Vegas. Coach forgot to pick me up because of the time difference. He forgot there's a 9-hour time difference. I didn't have any money to make a phone call. I stop a man. He says, okay, here's a quarter. I didn't know what a quarter was. He makes a phone call for me. We call the coach at university. Eventually, he comes and he gets me. Anyway, I start school. And obviously, I'm at a university now. It's very different. I hadn't been in school, I think, in like 4 or 5 years. And it was an absolute nightmare because, first of all, I did not understand the accent of the American accent, the professors. I had no idea on the topics they were talking about. So I struggled through it. I'm like, I came to this country. I'm the one who wants education. I would have just tried and do my best. So I struggled through it. 2 months later, coach calls me and he says, hey, there's some problems with some of your classes from the township because the university is not sure if they basically equivalent to the American high school. So what happens? They take the scholarship away. And now I was very close to be sent back to South Africa. But the coach, he played this big role. He went and pleaded with these people. He said, there's apartheid in South Africa. He's probably the only kid who was able to come out of South Africa through tennis. Is there anything we can do? So they said, okay, if he can borrow money from somewhere, this kid, and pay his first year, we'll let him stay. So eventually, I borrowed money from some friends in Europe, guys I work with in Austria. I pay. Right. I finished my first year, and I regained my scholarship.
Oh my goodness. You know what, Richman, that is a fascinating story. I didn't know. I attempt to keep up as much as I can, but there's so much stuff that you lost your scholarship. But you know what? The admirable aspect that you share with us in parting here is that it was a nightmare for you, but you made, because of your curiosity, you made it work for you, and you contacted people who were able to support you, and you were able to get back and get up and going. And the work that you're doing now is fantastic, working with young people in the school system. So tell us, what do you want to leave us with? I know that you say that working with young people and helping them to commit to a higher education, to escape poverty and live better lives, that's your paramount prime reason in life to be about. So share with us any pearls of wisdom, pearls, food for thought, whatever you want to leave us with as a takeaway. The stage is yours.
So as a young kid, I always had this vision of, in the middle of the night, I'll fly out of my house, fly to America with my tennis racket, play tennis, and then run back and go to sleep before my mother could come back. I was terrified that if she come back, I'm not there, she'd freak out. I always had this belief that I could achieve most of the things that I really try hard to do. Mm-hmm. I have two boys that were born in Austria. In between this story, I'd gone to Europe over the summer during my junior year, and then I couldn't get a visa to come back to America. I was stuck there for 6 years. When I came back, I was married with two boys. Mm-hmm. One was 2 and one was 4 months. I raised these boys. We raised these boys with trying to find a way that could also be successful by using the education and the tennis.
Yes.
So yes. I feel terrible because I pushed these kids to the brink, and fortunately it worked out for them. My older son, Nicholas, was recruited at Harvard University, graduated in 2016 with a computer science degree. He's a software engineer in San Francisco. My younger son, Yannick, went to Georgetown University, graduated, started his own company as a financial planner called Zulu Dreams Capital LLC. So today, I'm a high school counselor in a high school called Mojave High School, which is on the north side of the city. Most of the kids that I work with are basically kind of like come in the same environment that I grew up in. A lot of them are being raised by single parents, the moms, dads are somewhere, which is the same thing in my township. And I basically try to kind of advocate the same ideas that I use, the same model I use with my children, to find something that they can work hard at. And the number one option I find to escape poverty is education. Get your formal education first, and the rest of the stuff can come. So unfortunately, working in a school setting as a counselor, you don't have hours and hours to talk to the kids. We get them in between. But it is my passion and my number one priority to advocate the same ideas, because I'm a prime example of, if you commit to higher education, in fact, in a lot of cultures, this is a very normal, everyday thing. You know, in our culture, sometimes when I say culture, in our Black community, where we kind of like maybe lower class community, when somebody graduates high school, it's like they graduated from college. It's like this is supposed to happen. High school is free here. You know, they get busing and all that stuff. They're supposed to do it. But anyway, but again, for some families, if they're the first person to graduate high school, I'm not knocking that down. I think that's good. With the midst of all this, I published 2 books. A book called Zulu Dreams, From Apartheid to the Ivy League, which is an autobiography. It's available on Amazon. I also published a book called Success Beyond Expectations, which is a self-help book. And the subtitle is Dreams Without Action Become Pipe Dreams. And the reality is, it doesn't matter how hard you want things and you're dreaming, but if you're not willing to get out there and do something about your dream, it will just basically end up being a pipe dream. This book is composed of 9 steps that the kids can use to find their way. So at the end of the day, the last word for me is find something that you like, work hard at it, and believe that you can achieve the best thing that you want to achieve, but you're willing to do the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh my God, Richman, you'll have to come back again. You're an advocate for any and everyone who wants to rise above and keep the curiosity of wanting to know, learn, and be a part of and belong to a community that's positive. I love that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hold tight. And what I want to say in the ending here, I might ask you to hold there, because you might have to come back and help me. I try to remember and recall certain things, but sometimes it's hard. To all of you who are tuning in, to leaders in light, love, and legacy, thank you for joining us today. I'm Joy Ruffen, your minister of enlightenment, awareness, and awakenings. Our featured guest speaker today, Richman, I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. He'll say it. Go ahead,
Mahlangu.
Mahlangu.
Yes.
He's so gracious to me. Make sure that you pick up both of his books on Amazon, Zulu Dreams and Success Beyond Your Expectations, with 9 action steps that you can take. It's geared for all of us who want to rise, climb, and soar into our greatness. Let's keep this connection going. Join me every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to learn more about the different work the positive work that all of these featured guest speakers that I'll be bringing to you will be sharing with you. You can visit with me on my website, joyruffen.com. Very easy to remember. And remember that you are here because you're hoping to have something ignited, something to spark in you to give you the incentive to be about all the things that you're here to be. And whether it's style, whether it's leadership, whether it's the divine, masculine or feminine, the equality for all of us is about the power of connection, of belonging, and rising to all of the greatness that's within us. Remember, the greatness, the gift, and the genius of you is just waiting for your awakening. So stay present, stay bold, and keep soaring. And remember, every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be back here with you with a featured guest speaker. Richman Mahlangu, or something very close to that, he's given me grace. Make sure you get to Amazon and purchase his books because they're powerful and they will be an insight for you that you will never regret purchasing. My Eagles, my League of Eagles, much, much love from my heart to yours. Be and stay well and continue the journey of exploration, of knowing the discovery of why you're here and what you're to do while here. Much love. Until the next time, cheers.